So this is the rig that we're going to be using. This is the Animation Mentor Dragon rig. It's an older rig, but it's one that I used when I was learning how to animate dragons. So I wanted to kind of come back to this. That way I can compare my first flight cycle to my newest one. We'll see how it goes. And it's a pretty good rig. It's not as complex as a lot of newer rigs, but it is still really, really good. Now, with this rig, we're going to have to do a lot of setup in order to prepare for our animation, but we'll jump into that in just a little bit. The first thing whenever you're animating anything is you need to study what it is you're animating, how to animate it. Look at reference. Study as much as you can. This can go into all sorts of things. Reading about anatomy of flying creatures, of bats, of birds, of all of that kind of stuff. Studying, not just taking a quick look at one video and going, okay, I'll animate that. You really want to study things. Look at, if you're animating a dragon, look at other films that have animated dragons. Look at what they did. Try to study what they did. Don't copy what they did, but study it. So, once you do that, you want to just collect all your reference. So for example, here I have some reference. This is actually the reference I used when I first started learning how to animate dragons. I wanted to kind of share what I had come up with way back when. So I have just a random collection. So I've got this reference of a bat flying. Bats are really great because their bone structure is much closer to what a normal dragon would be. We've got large birds like eagles here. Now, I don't recommend usually having slow motion reference because that can throw you off when you're trying to get the timing of things. But if you have a mix, that's okay, because then you can see the breakdowns a little bit more easily, get the mechanics in there, but you get the timing from your other shots. So I've just got this big collection of different references, different eagles, different angles, so I can see how the wings are bending. And honestly, you can just go all out, and it really depends on what kind of bird you want to do. For example, I'm using a bald eagle, kind of hawk's eagles here, as my main reference, but you could animate a dragon that's more of a pelican in the way it flies, maybe more of an albatross, maybe more of a hawk instead of an eagle. Maybe it's more like I have here at the very end, I have geese, because they have these long necks that the dragon has. So the dragon, unlike an eagle, where an eagle has a very kind of short neck, a goose has a much longer neck. So this is going to give me a little bit more of how maybe the dragon's going to have that head overlap. You find all of these little bits and pieces and you study them. So, for example, I'm going to be taking the mechanics of the bat wing. So birds, when their wing structure is this is one of the weird things about most animals, is their bone structures are almost all the same. So, for example, a human arm is actually very similar to a bird arm. The only difference is the length of the bones and that the fingers are kind of fused together. A bat is the opposite, where instead of all the fingers being fused together at the tip and then the feathers coming off of it, their fingers are extra long. These are fingers right there. These are the bat's fingers right here. And then you have the little thumb right there. So they just have really, really long fingers that are webbed that allow them to fly. So if I look at my dragon, well, look at that. Long fingers. So I'm going to be able to use this as the kind of mechanics for what the fingers and the membrane should be doing. And just Steph, oh, thank you so much for the sub. I really appreciate that. Geez, 4 months already. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to be using the mechanics of the wing. But a bat is very small, and even if you look up reference of the largest bat, which I believe is some sort of fruit bat, I forget the name of it exactly. I remember looking up reference when I was animating dragons. Even the biggest bat isn't as big as something like an eagle or a pelican or something like that. So let's see. The notification didn't work when you are in full face. Oh, did it not show up? Interesting. I'll have to watch out for that. So I want the timing and kind of the size of a larger animal. Now, none of these are going to be the size that I actually need. Even the largest bird is not going to be nearly the size I want for this dragon. I want this dragon to be something where a person could ride on the shoulders of it here. I want a huge dragon. So, oh, I took my prime and nothing happened? Oh no! No, why? Let's see, I got that notification. I don't even see it here in my activity feed. Weird, it didn't go through. It's not even just a notification on my, the streaming software. It didn't even go through on Twitch for some reason. Oh, that sucks. No! I'll just do the dance anyway. I'll imagine the song at this point. It's just baked into me. So, but anyway, thank you so much for the prime, even though it didn't show up. I really appreciate that. With the birds, I'm going to use as large a bird as possible, and I'm going to take my timing and base it off of a large bird. Now, if we look at the timing of an eagle here, for example, and look at the speed that it flaps. So for example, here, let's see where we'll take this one. So if we go from the up pose where the wing is at its highest to the down pose here where the wing is at its lowest, right around there, we can start to get our base timing. So for example, here, frame 54 to frame 65. So it takes 11 frames for the wings to come down. And then we'll count the amount of frames it takes to go up. We'll find an average of that. Get our timing from as many different references as you can. And then from there, we can just scale it up and make it a little slower. The larger a creature is, the longer it'll take for things to move. Whereas a smaller creature, if you were animating a tiny little sparrow, it's gonna have very, very fast wing motions. Now, this doesn't mean that we just slow it down. Not at all. It just means that we're going to have things take a little bit more time to wind up. So I'm going to take those elements from there. I'm going to be taking the head motion of the goose. So I'm going to look at how the head moves in comparison to the body here. You can see how stable it is, but how that long neck, we kind of get this bump in the neck right here. Right there. So it's not stabilized down here at the base. It's actually the neck itself that's stabilizing. And the head is stabilized. And Timber Cow, thank you so much for the subscription. Oh, geez. Subscribe for 6 months in advance? Oh, whoa. Jeez, thank you so much. Wow, thank you. I really appreciate that. Hey, Matei. Welcome. Welcome to the stream. It's great to have you here. For anyone who doesn't know, Matei is an awesome animator. He's got a lot of cool stuff. For anyone who's in Animation Mentor, check him out. Just look at his work. It's super inspirational. Let's see. Is it easier to animate a dragon if we animate the body first with a reptile reference for poses and do the timing for the wings later? It depends on what you're aiming for and what the shot calls for. Today, we're going to be doing a cycle, which means that the wings are going to be kind of the big main motion here. So in my case, what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to approach the wings first, then the body. It might seem kind of backwards, but because the wings are the big driving force here, I want to make sure those are feeling correct before the body goes into too much refinement. And because we're not dealing with contacts, we can actually do that. It's just in the air. Now, if you were animating a creature and you had to hit certain poses, so for example, the dragon's coming in, it's going to land on the edge of a castle on the battlements before it like lands down and then starts biting at people, and you want to get that like leg reaching out and claw onto the battlements, then I might animate the body first because the body is impacting with the ground or it's doing something specific, and then I can just add in the wings after. it really depends on what's the leading force here, what's the most important bit. So there's no true answer, but I would just focus on what's the most important thing and then build from there. I hope that makes sense. I was showing my mom some of his work last night. Yes, see, Matei's work is amazing. For those of you not in Animation Mentor, you're probably going to see his work in the student showcase. So when the Animation Mentor student showcase comes out, look for the name Matei. It's going to be really cool. So we're going to take all of these different elements. Now, another thing that geese do that raptors, so predatory birds like hawks and eagles, there's a difference in the way they handle their feet, and same thing with smaller birds. So if you look at the way eagles hold their feet, they tuck them in. So you can see the foot's way back here. Now, when we look at an eagle, it kind of looks like the foot's just hanging back. But if you actually look at how they bring their feet are actually kind of doing this, where they're tucked in forward. This allows the feet to be able to reach out and grab more easily. So you can see right there. Look how long those legs are. If we compare this, the legs look teeny tiny, like they're just that. But if we look here, that. Look how long those legs are. They're all tucked in and basically ready to be released and grab onto things. Now, geese are similar, but their feet, instead of curling in, will hang back a little bit. So you can see there's the leg right there, dragging much further back. Now, does that matter? Well, yes and no. It depends on how we want to approach animating the dragon. And we'll talk about that when we get to the rig itself. But in essence, you want to find as many different pieces of reference as you can, study them as much as you can, and then bring them together. We are not just using one and going, that's what we're animating, done. So that's going to be the first thing. Now, the next thing that I highly recommend, if you're wanting to animate birds or any flying creature, take a look at this link right here. This is Brendan's Body Blog, a flight tutorial. This is probably one of the best resources you're ever going to read on flight mechanics. It is fantastic. It's got all sorts of information in here. I'm not going to go over all of this because, well, you can read it. It's very in-depth. But it talks about how the bones work in the arms, how the silhouettes work, the timing of the wings, all of this stuff. How the hips and the chest and the head all work together. It is in-depth and very, very good. Highly recommend read through this. It can be a little dry at times, but it is well worth your time. So, we've got our reference. We've read the body blog there. Next thing to do is plan things out. And John, hello! Hope you're doing well. So the next thing we want to do is plan things out. So I'm just going to share some of the planning I did way back when I was first learning how to animate dragons. So this is what I did when I was in the Creature Workshop in Animation Mentor. My first dragon animation. So I basically went through and I drew out the the key poses that I wanted to hit. I took some notes, watched the silhouettes, basically just taking notes from my reference. These are some of the notes. I've got pages and pages of other notes in a document somewhere. This is what I could find for today. I've got different thoughts on how will the dragon hold its leg, what pose should I put it into. So for example here, wings should flap a similar to slightly laden eagle. So what that basically means is a dragon is going to be heavy. It's got this really long tail. So it's not going to fly as if it's a very light bird with a tiny little feathered tail. It's going to fly a little bit more like it's an eagle that's holding something, as if like an eagle holding a fish. There's a lot of weight back there, which is going to drag its hips downwards. So I'm trying to think of that. How can I make that feel natural so that the tail doesn't just feel like it's hanging in midair? Consider when a creature is flying, all of their weight is being supported in the air by the wings. So if you have the tail just kind of straight out from there, it's either that dragon is flying insanely fast or that tail doesn't weigh that much. Let's see. I have a question for you regarding the dragon. What kind of reference should I study for landing and picking up? Look for eagles and owls catching prey on the ground. Things like that. Or even just birds landing. Look at things like that. That's going to be great reference for a dragon landing on things. And especially if you have it picking something up, look at eagles catching fish or catching rabbits or stuff like that. So the tail should be stiff. This will make it so that the tail's not just hanging and flapping in the wind. Like I just put all of these 2 little notes in there. And yes, this is technically a wyvern, not a dragon. If you really want to use the correct terminology, which I actually do, because I've got like dragon encyclopedias back there, like all the anatomy of dragons and the different kinds of dragons, the worms versus the wyverns versus the actual dragons, like all of that. I love that kind of mythology. So I'm glad, yes, it is a wyvern. Just putting lots of notes. So for example, here, the head is similar to a goose, the body is similar to an eagle, the wings, mixture of a bat and an eagle. If it was flying, I kind of want eagle-esque, because it is predatory, so I want those claws in there. If it's walking, it's going to be more like an ostrich, and then so on and so forth. And then the timing. Now, I'm not going to be using this timing here. I'm going to be using a different timing, just based on some new stuff that I wanted to try out. So plan out your shot. Draw all this out. Think about it. And it doesn't have to be great drawings. As you can see, like my drawing of a dragon is just a square for a head, circles for hips, and then lines for the wings and the tail. That's it. But it helps me keep things in mind. How should the wings arc? How should the silhouettes read correctly? It just at least gives me something to think about as I'm working. Now, I also did a little bit more planning here. This is just to share just some notes I wrote down for myself as I'm going to approach this, mostly for the timing. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later, but one of the important things when you're animating a flight cycle, unlike a walk, is that timing is going to be a little different. The big reason is that if you're animating a walk cycle, most of us as animators will animate a walk cycle pretty early on. The main thing with a walk cycle is you have your contact, down, passing, up, and contact pose. So the moment the foot contacts the ground, the down pose of the hips, the passing pose where the legs pass each other, the up pose, the highest point of the hips, and then the contact. That's the typical walk cycle posing. Now for a flight cycle, you don't really have any of those. You don't have contacts because the dragon's not contacting. You don't really have a passing pose. You could consider maybe when the arms are passing the body, kind of the passing, but not really. Both arms are just going up and down at the same time. So you don't have this counter motion. So we don't even really have a passing pose. What we have is the down and the up. The wings at their highest, the wings at their lowest. Great, okay. But unlike a walk where we're watching the hips, the highest point of the hips and the lowest point of the hips, on a flight cycle, we have a lot of different points. We have the chest, highest point of the chest, lowest point of the chest. We have the hips. They have their own up and down. The arms, the wings, have their own up and down. So you have to be a little bit more careful what you're looking for. And I'm going to talk about this once we get into the animation. But what I've done here is I've found the timing for the ups and downs of the humerus, so that's the upper bone here, the upper arm, the tip of the wing, so that's humerus down, tip of the wing down, and then this is the body, the chest. So my down poses for the wings are here, and then my up and down for the body is there. Now I didn't do the hips because the hips kind of just counter the they counter the body, or sorry, the hips counter the wings, so I don't really need to focus on that too much. But I got all of this in place here, and this is going to get me my key poses. So timing with a flight cycle is going to be a little different, or I should say blocking is going to be a little different, because we don't have those typical contact down, passing up contact. Even like a quadruped cycle, you have contact, passing, or contact down, passing up contact for the front legs and the hips. You're just doubling it. Flight cycle doesn't have that. So we have to be very careful what poses we use. And we want to make sure we have some poses, or else it's just going to look weird. So we've got all of this. Now, like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about that as we kind of approach the animation, but I just wanted to share some of that. So let me move this all onto my other monitor so I can look at it while I'm working. Okay, so we've done our research, we've looked at our reference, we've planned things out, we've studied other animated shots to see how they did dragons. We're ready to go. Now, this is very important. You want to do all that research because not all animals move the same. Look at How to Train Your Dragon. All of those dragons move differently. The grunkles, was it? The little short ones. They move more like bees than, for example, the Night Fury, which is a little bit more like a hawk, which is very different from the huge dragon that moved like just this tank, this behemoth. So you want to do your research, look into it. Tara, thank you for the reminder. Let's see. So with that, let's approach the rig now. Now, every rig is going to be different, but there's a few things that we want to watch out for when we're approaching a flight cycle. The biggest thing is that we want to make sure that we're animating in a way that we are not fighting the rig or fighting ourselves as we're animating. I don't want to have to counter animate a whole bunch of stuff. I don't want to have to fight to get good arcs and polish this shot. So let's start with the body first. When you're animating a quadruped or a flying creature, one thing I typically recommend is animating the creature in IK spine. So for anyone who doesn't know what that is, FK spine is the way our spines move naturally. If I rotate the lower portion of the spine, that moves the upper portion, and everything kind of moves along with. IK spine is separate. So for example, if I move the chest here, the hips don't react, and you can get some really funky animation if you do that and you're not careful. But as much as we'll have to be careful of certain things, it'll make animating this much easier, because we're going to be able to get that offset between the hips and the chest much more easily. Same thing with quadrupeds. It just makes things much more approachable. Okay. What else? Well, we need to think of how we're going to animate the dragon moving in space. Even though we're doing a cycle here, I'm still going to approach it as if it could be for a dragon that's like dipping through the air and all of this kind of stuff. And see, if the creature doesn't have IK spine, what do you recommend? If it doesn't have IK spine, unfortunately, you're just going to have to fight through it. Most creatures should have an IK spine. I can't think of a single rig I've ever used a creature rig that didn't have an IK spine. So if it doesn't, you just have to kind of push through, which sucks, because trying to animate an FK spine on a quadruped or a flying creature is just the big problem is that you're constantly counter animating everything. You make an adjustment on the hip, well, that throws up off everything you did in the chest, and it's just a pain. So let's go in here, and as we're animating the creature flying, there's a few things that I want to pay attention to. Now, the first thing is, what control are we going to use to actually make it fly? I don't want to use this layout control here. The layout control, or the root control, is there to reposition the animation globally. I'm not going to be using that. Now, with this rig, and with most kind of quadruped flying rigs, what you're going to have is the cog, or global control, which right here, this is called the body control, allows me to move the entire body, like so. Now this is really good because it allows me to move the creature through the air and kind of just globally move it. One of the ways I like to approach animating any kind of flying creature, or even quadrupeds, is imagining it kind of like a toy that you take the main control and you're just making it fly through the air like this. And then you layer in the hip, chest, and wing motions on top of that. This way it's very easy to make a global change where, okay, instead of arcing down like this, maybe it'll arc up and go through. And you just use that one main control and you get good, clean arcs done. This just makes your life a lot easier. The problem is that by default, this control is in the wrong spot on most rigs. They put it in the center of the body, or near the hips, which is great if the creature is walking, because if I rotate this, you can see that it rotates from the hips. Great. If this dragon was walking along the ground, that would be perfect, or if it was more like a dinosaur. But it's flying. Its center of gravity is going to be in its chest, by the shoulders. It's hanging from its arms, which means that when I rotate it, I want it to rotate from that point. That's going to allow me to get the drag. And for example, if the dragon was going to reach out and claw at something to grab it or to land, I'm not going to have this weird chest going up. I want the hips to come down. So on most rigs, most good creature rigs will have this ability to offset the controls. So one of the first things that I will do is I'm going to find, in this case, it's the cog control. This would be sometimes called the gimbal offset. There's all sorts of different names. Whichever control it is, it should be right under the main body control, or the main cog control. I'm just going to take that and scoot it backwards, like so. And what this does is you can see that the main body control is now offset. Let's move it a little bit further back. I want the pivot point to be right at the shoulder area, right around here. So that's the pivot point there, a little further back, right around here. Okay, that's pretty good. I could refine it a little bit more, but somewhere around there is good. Okay, what does that do? Well, now I have my main body control up here, and like before, I can still move this and basically, like I said before, move it like as if it's a toy and I just swing it through the air. But when I rotate this now, the dragon pivots from his chest. So now you can see, if I wanted to have him land, I can just do that, and the hips swing down and through, because he's being supported by his wings. Once he lands, I would switch that back to the hips, so now the weight transfers back into the hips. This is very important. It's not going to make or break your animation, and you could animate it normally and it'll work, and no one will ever see a difference. But this will make your animation easier to work with as you're animating, especially when you're dealing with the flying. So I've created that offset. Perfect. Now let's actually just zero that out, get that rotation back in place there. Okay, so we've got that. What else can we do? Well, let's actually focus on the legs first, because the legs are going to be another thing that are going to be very tricky. Right now they're in IK, which means that the feet just stay on the ground. Great for if the creature is just walking along. Now, I don't want the creature to walk. I want those legs to be up with the body as it's flying. So I have a couple of choices. The first choice, which most people would kind of use as the obvious choice, would be switching the legs to FK. So I'll switch the legs to FK, and now if I move the body here, the legs stay with the body. Great. Haha. Now I can fly it through the air and the legs aren't just hanging down weirdly. Perfect. Not only that, but I have a lot of fine control over getting the overlap and all of that stuff into that leg. So I could pose it out. If I wanted to pose it out a little bit more like a real bird, it would be kind of tucked up here. And then we would get something kind of like that. Let's bring that knee in just a little bit. Whoop. So this would be flying a little bit more like a real bird, something like that. But I could switch that FK leg and now it'll just follow along. Great. And in this case, I might do that. We'll see how we kind of approach this. But there is another solution. Not all rigs have this, but most good rigs should. Instead of switching the IK leg to FK, I'm just going to switch what the IK leg follows. So by default, this leg is set to follow the layout curve. That's this main control here. Basically, if I move that control, everything moves with. But I can switch what the IK leg follows. And in this case, I could actually set it to not follow the layout, but to follow the cog, this main control right there. Or technically it's this one here on this rig. So let's have it follow the cog, like so. Now, it follows the body, just like the FK would, but is still in IK, which means I can very easily just have it reach out and I get all of this motion with one control instead of upper leg, lower leg, foot. Does it make a huge difference? Not really. It really depends on how I want to animate this. For one, if I'm trying to animate it in this pose, it's going to be almost impossible to get with IK. You can see here, I'm just trying to pose it out and that knee doesn't want to work with me. But if I want to drag it back like this, well, that works pretty well. And then instead of having to animate the hip, the lower leg, the upper leg, I can just do this and I get that nice motion right through there. So I have choices. It really depends on what I want to do and how I want to approach this. But either way, whichever one that I choose, the main thing is that as I'm animating this, I can now just take one control and the whole dragon goes with. That's the important bit. Let's see. Let me just catch up with the chat here. How about the head? Should we animate the head in global? I faced the problem with the tiger's head looking funky. So the head is going to be something very specific that I'm going to go over in a little bit as we start to animate. But essentially, the head of any flying creature tends to be extremely stable. If you look at birds, it's like they have a gyroscope in their head. Their head is stabilized perfectly. Which means that as I'm animating the chest, for example, moving the chest up and down and doing all of this stuff, that head shouldn't really be moving very much. I also don't want it to twist as the body is twisting like this. It should stay in place. Now, certain rigs will have a control that allows you to turn that off, so the head just stays perfectly in place. With this rig, I have what's called the head align right here. If I turn that on and then rotate the body, now you can see the head stays facing forward. Great, perfect. But as I move it up and down, it's still moving up and down with the body, which is not good, because what that's going to mean is I'm going to counter animate everything on that head, which sucks. I don't want to do that. If your rig is built like this, sometimes you have to do it, but I'm going to show later on a way that we can avoid that. Basically by reconstraining the head, and it's not really re-rigging it, but switching what that head will follow manually ourselves with some constraints, which will give us perfect, or I should say, it'll give us the ability to animate this exactly the way we want without having to counter animate anything. So that's going to be the goal of the head animation, to really give that stability and that predatory feeling to it. Okay. What else do we have? Well, we've got the IK hips, IK chest. We've got, typically with things like this, you're going to have a middle control that allows you to flex the body. Same thing with the neck. We've got the head control. Shoulders, good. Now, we do have a question that we have to ask ourselves. How do we want to animate the wings? You could do it in IK or FK. Personally, I like FK for animating wings because you just have a lot more control over the individual parts and you're not having to fight the IK, especially trying to get the elbow and the wrist overlap to work just right. I kind of prefer FK for that. It's just a little simpler. It really is up to you. The big thing is that you just want to make sure that those controls aren't following the chest too much. So as a bird twists, we don't want the wings to just feel like they're locked to the chest the whole time. So for example, here, if I rotate the chest, I believe it should be like that by default. You can see the wings stay stable. They don't twist along with. I personally prefer this because it makes it so that I can build some offset to the chest a lot more easily without the wings getting all caught up in it. So all of this is just looking through your rig and thinking through. Now, when you're first animating a flight cycle, one thing to keep in mind is you don't know how to animate a flight cycle yet. This is the first one you've ever done. So a lot of it's going to be trial and error, see what works best for you. But try to plan ahead what is going to influence which controls and how do you make it so that you're not fighting things. And don't be afraid of redoing some stuff later if you find out that, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to counter animate that whole head. Well, let's fix some of that. How did I learn all of this? Did you take the AM Creatures Workshop? Yes, I did take the Creatures Workshop and then I did some creature animation on my own after. I love the Creature Workshops. If you get a chance, I highly recommend anyone who's in AM, or even if you're not in AM, the Creature Workshops are a great way to learn creatures. I would definitely recommend making sure you have animation experience before you go into that though, just because creature animation is very tricky. Typically, I recommend if you're in Animation Mentor, wait until you're in at least class 4 or 5 before considering taking creatures. Ideally, after class 6. The big reason being that creature work is fantastic stuff for your demo reel. So if you can do a really good job on it, it's going to be a great selling point for your reel. So if you take it too soon, it's not that you're not going to learn something, but the shots aren't going to be as strong as if you kind of finish the main character animation program. So just something to keep in mind. Honestly, if you want to learn it, learn it. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do here, at this point, we're pretty much ready to start animating. We've kind of gone through most of the big rig stuff. At this point, the rest of it I can kind of go in as we're animating. But one of the things I do want to do is that I want to simplify this rig. There's a lot of controls here that I really don't need to worry about right now. So for example, we've got all the membrane controls here. We can see the membrane. We've got horn controls here. We've got the jaw control, eye controls, so many different things. I really don't need to see all of this stuff. It's just kind of getting in the way. Additionally, for dragons and things like that, quadrupeds, it's nice to lower the resolution of the rig just to make it a little bit faster to work with. They are typically pretty heavy rigs, so if we can work a little faster, it's always nice. So how am I going to do that? Well, first let's just lower the resolution of the rig. So I can set the rig down to proxy mode in this case, which is just going to be a very blocky mode of the rig. You can see that At this point, there's actually no skinning to it anymore. It's just individual pieces, which is going to make it look a little weird, but make it actually easier to work with and faster. Additionally, on this rig, I can turn off the membrane. Oop. And let's make sure I actually turn that off. Oop. There we go. So that's just going to make it easier to pose out. I'm not getting things lost on there. If I wanted to, I can even turn off the legs and the tail, all of that stuff. So what else? Well, let's reset the legs just a little bit here. Just for now. That way we can focus on just getting... Make sure I don't have joints visible. Okay, good. Oops. No, I didn't want IK, and I want this to be zeroed out. There you go. And then this is going to follow the cog, and that's going to follow the cog. There we go. Let's see. I'd love to take the Creature Workshop by Alves. Yes, he's very good. He's amazing. Speaking of the workshop, what's the workload like? Is it more or less the same? About the same as regular character animation classes. The big thing is that the rigs are much more in depth. So you think of it like body mechanics, but more intensive. You're dealing with a lot of things that are just more complicated in terms of motion. Like a quadruped, you're dealing with 4 legs instead of 2. In some ways it's simpler because, well, you don't have to worry about arms, just swinging around. But the big thing that's tricky is that these are also animals that we can't shoot reference for. So you have to do a lot more study of reference and analyzing reference, which can be very tricky. So you want to make sure you really have that good reference skill, looking for reference and combining references. Let's see. Then get to the Creature Workshop without knowing much about character animation, jumping straight into creature work, you would get bogged down in all the details. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, you definitely want to wait for anyone who's interested in creature classes. It's important to get those the main body mechanics in first, understanding that, because at least with regular body mechanics, you can shoot reference, you can study it. We know how people move. When you get into creatures, we do know how cats and dogs move. Many of us have grown up with cats and dogs, but it doesn't come as naturally because we are not cats and dogs. We don't know how that feels to move that certain way. We're not that size. So there's that level of disconnect that you have to be very careful of. Okay. So at this point, we've got the main controls in place, and for some reason, it looks like my layout curve is a little off center. There we go. Center that out. Okay. I'm just going to go through and hide controls that I know I'm not going to need. And the way I like to do this is I just add a new display layer here. And I'm just going to rename this extra controls. Turn off the visibility. And I'm just going to add those controls in. So for example, I know that I'm not going to need the horn controls. There's just really no point in animating the horns for this. And on this rig, if I do that, it'll actually hide the horns, which is nice. It's one less visual detail that I have to worry about. For now, I know I'm not going to worry too much about the membrane here in the center. I'm going to add those controls in there just to simplify this. This first pass is going to be mostly getting the key poses and the timing in place. From there, I can worry about the membrane after. Okay, what else don't I need? I'm going to worry about the fingers because those are definitely very visible. What other controls do we have? Well, we have this control here. This is the upper chest control, which basically controls the rotation of the chest this way. Now, this is a pretty good control, but I kind of prefer this one. We'll see. Both of them kind of do a similar thing, but neither are exactly where I want the pivot point to be. So I think I'm going to stick with the main chest control here because it's a little closer to what I want, and then I can use the up and down to get the main motion that I need. So I'm not going to use this one. I'm going to add that in there. One less control to worry about. We've got the neck stabilizing control. This basically just angles the neck. I don't really have to worry about that right now, but I'm going to keep it on just in case something comes up. This one here, this is going to be the neck shaper, which is going to be very useful. I definitely want that. We've got the cog. We'll want that visible the whole time. The torso control. This shapes the torso. We'll definitely want that in there. Our hip control is good. And then we've got the tail. Now, I'm going to approach the tail a little differently, but we're going to talk about that later. For now, I'm just going to keep the tail very simple. It's just going to stay stiff for the most of it. I want to get the main body motion in there first. The tail is just overlapping action. It's a secondary action, which means we want to get the main action of the body in first before we even do too much on the tail. Now, with that said, if the tail is doing something very specific, if I need to hit a pose and I want that tail to be in a very specific pose, it's going to swing through and hit someone or swipe through, then yes, I'm going to be blocking that tail in right away. In this case, it's just fluttering behind them. I don't really need to worry about it too soon. Honestly, at some point, I'm probably just going to go in here and turn off the tail visibility. Just like that, which looks a little weird. Just to kind of simplify it so we can focus on the body. For now, let's actually keep it on. Okay. So we've hidden the extra controls. At this point, we're pretty much close to ready to go. So let's take what we have here, and I'm just going to set a key. I'm going to take all this, set a key on frame 1. It's going to be my first pose. And then let's actually start posing it out. Now, a couple of things that I do want to do first. Let's make sure we have the higher quality so we can see the eyes a little bit more clearly. This is not going to be super important, but just in terms of making the character feel alive, a lot of dinosaur and dragon rigs, the eyes tend to stick outwards. So you can see here how the eyes are poking out to the side, which is okay, but it's not a very predatory style pose. Predatory animals tend to have their eyes facing forward. So if I want this dragon to feel more predatory and kind of more focused on what it's hunting, I'm just going to bring those eyes forward a little bit. Something like that. I could even bring them down just a little bit too. Something like that. So it's not a big deal, honestly, but in my case, I just don't want that to feel like a prey animal. I want it to feel like a predator. I'm going to give it a little bit more focus. Okay. So with that, I can actually take the eye controls and hide those because I don't need them anymore. Haha. There we go. One less control. So let's keep going here and get our first pose in. Now, the main thing I'm going to do is just kind of get the dragon in a rough pose that I can use as a basis to build things off of. So the first thing is that the hips are going to have to be raised up a little bit more. If this dragon is flying, it's not going to be flying with his butt dragging down like so. That would make it feel very awkward and just not very aerodynamic. I'm assuming this dragon is going to be flying fairly quickly, so I want that hip to be pretty high. Now this is where it depends on the size of the dragon and what your dragon is doing, all of that kind of stuff. You could have the hip raised up a little bit so it feels more active. It'll make the bird or the dragon feel a little bit smaller, like it's kind of a small bird size. If you have it dragged down a little bit, it'll make the dragon feel heavier because those legs, the tail is dragging the body down. So I want to go for a little bit of weight, so I'm going to make sure that those hips are just down a little bit. Next thing, I'm going to choose a default pose for the legs. I'm thinking just kind of off the top of my head, I'm going to go with this. This is what you typically see in most dragon style animations. The feet hanging behind the body like so. I'm thinking that's what I'm going to go with, just because it creates a really interesting silhouette. I might change that as we go. Honestly, it's not a big deal if it changes midway. So just to kind of compare, I would switch that to FK. And the other pose that I would do is the hip forward, and then that dragging this way. So something like this. The main reason I'm not a huge fan of this kind of pose is that it tends to it overextends the anatomy of the back leg a little bit, which can feel a little strange. So what I mean by that is just the way the bone structure works. It's adding a really big strain right on that bone there and on those tendons, which can feel a little weird. It also makes it so that as the chest moves up and down, because the knees are so long compared to a normal bird, if you look at a regular bird, for example, let's look at my reference again. The chest is up here, and this is where the knee is kind of placed right there. If we look at a hawk or an eagle, even if let's go, good one here, like really tucked in, it's probably about there. And then the chest is here. So there's this separation. With the dragon, that knee is right under the chest, which means that as it's flapping and its arms come down, its wings come down, it might end up hitting its own knee, which is going to be a little bit weird. So because of the proportions of this dragon, this is going to probably feel a little strange. I think this is going to work better. This is where it's all up to you. How do you want to pose out your dragon? How do you want to pose out your creature? Okay, and it looks like I accidentally rotated another control up here. So you'll notice here we have some hip controls right in here. These are separate from the main hip control. So we've got the main hip right there. The other two are kind of just like, it's almost like shrug controls, which are nice to have if you're wanting to add like a muscle jiggle or something like that. But I really don't need them visible most of the time. So I'm actually going to hide those. We just don't need those. There's no anatomy there that would warrant that motion. So we've got kind of a basic pose right here. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that tail and straighten it out just a bit. Get a little drag in there. I'm not going to worry about animating it. I just want to get a basic body pose in here. Thinking of the line of action, how do I want that to flow through? The head would probably be a little lower here. And maybe angled down ever so slightly. So something like that. Okay. We've got our first pose. It's not posed all the way, but I just want to get something close to the way it's going to work. Now, let's see. We've got a question here. Might sound odd, but I was wondering, after finishing the shot, refining and polishing the final stage, ready to go for the reel, you don't like the Playblast version. It doesn't look that good, and you want to render it out with Arnold or something. Is there a way to assign Arnold shaders to the creature and simply light through a tutorial to render out, or any service for students? There's no services or things like that for students that I know of, but I did do a whole series of demos. I think it's still up on Twitch, if you go to the videos page, on assigning textures and materials to a rig to render out with Arnold. And I actually used this dragon rig and created a render version of this where not only is it rendered out, but it's got like the bump maps, so you get all that fine detail of the scales and extra things like that, making the horns feel a little bit more like bone versus the skin that feels more like skin, things like that. So there's a few different videos that I recorded on that specifically. And it's not that hard to do yourself, honestly. And as for lighting setup, it doesn't have to be a complex lighting setup. Something very simple can work very, very well. Often better than more complex setups. How is it called? I forget what it's called. If you just click on the avatar down below and then go to the videos page, I believe it should be under the Maya section. I wish I could organize it better on Twitch. But it's basically something to do with Arnold or rendering. It shouldn't be too tricky to find. If you can't find it, just let me know and I can send you a link to it later. So yeah. So before I'm getting off track here. Oh, no problem. And yeah, definitely let me know if you can't find it. I'm pretty sure it should be there. So we've got the body in place. Great. We've got everything pretty much set up. Yay. At this point, it's time to start animating. And this is where things get a little tricky because we have a few choices that we can approach with. And Tara, thank you. We can animate this pose to pose, which means that we just focus on every single pose, going through, making sure they all read correctly. We could animate in a straight ahead way, which I probably wouldn't do for something like this because it would just feel a little... It would just be tricky to get everything exactly the way I want. Or I could do a layered approach. And a layered approach is what I typically like to do for creature animation, because it allows me to focus on smaller bits and making sure that they work correctly instead of trying to get everything to work all at the same time. There's a lot of different moving parts here that go into getting a creature to work properly. And if you're not careful, it can start to get very tricky, keeping track of all of your poses, all of that stuff. So normally I'll use a layered method. For today, I'm going to probably try to do a little bit of both. I'm going to do a little bit of post pose and then we'll switch to layered afterwards. The reason I'm going to do it this way is I want to show a little bit of both, just to show how I would approach both ways, as well as to kind of showcase the things that I'm watching out for a little bit more clearly. So as we're starting to animate this, I'm going to first focus on the chest and the wings. The hips and the tail legs, a lot of their motion depends on how the wings move. The head just kind of stays stabilized. Honestly, the head's not going to have that much animation on it for a cycle. But the chest and the wings are going to be our biggest things to hit. So let's start with our key poses. See, just to refresh my memory, layered means that you focus on animating one section at a time, right? Yeah, so I would animate, for example, the chest first, get that in there, then the wings, get those in there, then the hips, so on. So you're building off of all of the animation. So let's get started in here. Now, like I said, just as a reminder, this main control here, this is going to be the main control to move the dragon and have them fly if we wanted to actually move them in space. The actual up and down of the chest is actually going to come from the actual chest control here. So this is just our global flying control. If I wanted to, I could even attach this to a curve, an arc, and just use that to animate the dragon moving through space. So we're on frame 1. Let's start with our down pose. Now, there is, like I was mentioning before, something to keep in mind with the down pose. Which down are we talking about? Are we talking about the down of the body, the down of the wings as a whole, or the down of the upper arm? This part right here. Because each one of them has a different down pose. They're all at their lowest at a different time during the flight. And this is going to be one of the things that gets you that weight in the dragon the most. One of the biggest things that I tend to see when people first start animating flights is that they'll just take the arms and do this. Flap, 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 flap. Like that. So you just have this Yeah, there's one of them right there. And there's another one. So that's the basics one. There should be a more advanced one as well, which uses the dragon rig. So as we're animating this, this is what I don't want. I don't want the wings to just flap this way and the upper arm and all the way to the wingtips are just moving in sync. This makes it feel like a toy and makes it feel very light. There's a big offset between all of these poses. So let's focus on just getting the arm poses in first. We'll kind of break this down. So on frame 1, this is going to be the humerus down, or the upper arm down. So when the upper arm is at its lowest. And honestly, the range you go here is up to you. The wings can flap a huge amount. If a creature is flying very fast, there's going to be very little flex in the wings. They're not going to move down that far. We could go right up to here as a maximum. If the creature is flying much slower, maybe taking off or landing, you could go all the way up to here. You could get a huge amount of flex in those wings. So let me make sure I have my reference open here so I can kind of see the shape of the wings that I'm going for. Find the reference that I need. Okay. So as the arms go down, I'm going to go for big arm swings, or bigger than what you would kind of go for with a smaller bird at flying at this speed. So the wings are probably going to come down there. This is going to be their lowest point. And as they come down, the elbows are bent. Wings don't just flap with the elbows straight and just do this. If you look at the mechanics of a bird, and this is where I would highly recommend looking at Brendan's body blog, it goes over that in detail. There's a lot of flexing in the elbow. So as that wing's coming down, we're going to get this nice flex in here. So just to kind of show that here, it's this section. Where is it? Right here. Talking about the bones and how they flex. You can see right there. There's that. It looks like it's straight, but that's just skin and tendons right here. The wing is actually bent at that point. So I should say the elbow is bent there. So let's get that in here. That's going to be the lowest point. It's also going to be, make sure I move them both at the same time. So which axis am I using? This one. Okay, good. So we'll get that bent a little bit. The other thing is that as the or any bird brings their wings down, they also go forward. So it's not just flapping this way. As they come down, it swings forward this way. They bring their wings ahead of them. This is very important because it gives the creature the ability to get more wind shear, if you're talking about the actual mechanics of flight, which is basically the ability to get more lift under the wing. So we're gonna get something like that. Let's see. I'm not gonna worry too much about the shoulders yet. I'll do a quick pass on them afterwards. So this is a little bit of layered, but a little bit of pose to pose. I'm kind of going back and forth here just to explain what I'm aiming for here. So the pose, this is where looking at your reference is very nice. So I'm just looking at some eagle reference right here, right there. And I'm just finding that specific point that I need. So I think maybe let's bring that up just a little bit more. And then the wings need to be kind of rotated out a little bit more. So let's take those wrists, kind of bring that up. Now it's going to look a little weird that's not normal. This is not the final pose yet. I'm just getting some rough blocking in here so I can figure out the timing and how everything's going to feel more than anything. Okay, so we get something like that. We'll just call it for now. We'll refine it in a little bit. Okay, the next pose that I have, where is my planning, is going to be on frame 5. Now, frame 5 is going to be a very important one in my case. This is when the tips of the wings are going to be at their lowest. So at this point, the wings here are starting to come back up. The tips of the wings, though, are coming down. So you're at frame 1. That is the starting pose? Yes. So frame 1 is going to be my first pose, which is I'm using this as the upper arm at its lowest. Honestly, you can pick whatever point you want. It could be the body at its lowest or the highest, whichever. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm trying to get things to offset here. So as the upper arm starts to come up here, the lower arm is still going down slightly, like so. And then the wrists are going to curl inwards. And I could curl the fingers in after. I'm going to worry about that in a little bit. So, haha, we're starting to get some flapping. The terrible little flight cycle. Now, as this happens, let me look at the reference. It's not bad to take a look at your reference as you're doing all of this. One of the big things and important things here is that you don't assume motion. We don't want to just kind of go, oh, well, yeah, I know exactly what's going to happen here. Let's just get it in place and done. No. We want to really think through these actions. So, for example, as the upper arm starts to come back, the elbows will come back here. So it's coming back. These will flip forward there. We're starting to get all of this offset happening in these wings. Okay, now it's going to look a little weird for now. Again, this is just a quick first pass. Now let's go to our next important pose here for the wings, which is going to be the up pose. And this is going to be frame 16. I'm just going to take everything. You'll notice I'm keying the whole body. This is because I can now layer in some animation afterwards once I get the wings in place here. So, up pose. This is going to be where the upper arm is at its highest, which is going to be, looking at my reference, somewhere around here. So somewhere around there. And see, where's my other bit of reference there? Okay. So I've got a lot of reference open up on my other monitors. It's important to have reference. Doesn't mean I'm copying it. I'm just making sure I get the poses where they need to be. So, up pose. The upper arms are going to come up. They're going to be kind of at their highest point right there. What's that mean, layered animation? So layered animation is that you'll notice that I'm not touching the body. I'm not touching the hips. I am just focusing 100% on the arms right now. This allows me to focus on really just getting the mechanics that I need in those first. And it needs to come up and there. And just kind of making sure that I'm not getting too lost in a lot of details all at once. So let's kind of do something like that. I think the wings here need to be a little straighter. The elbows, I should say. Okay, something like that. It comes up. Let's get those wrists in place. So at this point, the wrists, this is not where the tips of the wings are going to be at their highest. The tips of the wings are actually going to be dragging down right here. Then bring this back just a little bit. So something like that. Okay, it's definitely a little flat. We're going to push this a little bit more in just a second. Okay, let's get this is going to be one of the most important poses here. So find my timing here. The tip of the wing upwards. So this is going to be on frame 24. And let's set a key. And I'm just going to reset my pose here just a little bit. So you'll notice, I know I keep repeating this, I'm not worried about getting things perfect right now. Definitely not. It actually looks pretty bad in many respects. In terms of like things are not working great. The reason I'm not worrying too much about it is because I can focus on just getting things close to where they need to be. And then from there, I can work between all the poses to make sure that they actually work correctly. So now that's coming down, and those wing tips I can push up a little higher here. Now we get that nice motion right through there. So we're starting to get a flap. Haha. Does it look great? No, not at all. But we're seeing the skeleton of it, basically. So this is the main flapping motion right through here. It comes there, down, and then let's finish the cycle here. We need to go back down to our first frame there. So I'm just going to take this, copy it, and this is going to go to frame 42. It's a 41 frame cycle here. So we now have a cycle. And if I wanted to, let's just do this because I can take all of my animation curves right here in the graph editor, curves, post-infinity, cycle with offset, and then curves, pre-infinity, cycle with offset, and aha! Flight cycle, done, haha, demo complete. If only. No, this is just the bare bones. We've got just the basic wing flap in here. At this point, let's start refining this a little bit more. Make this work more clearly. And the reason I like to work in this way, so I just did some rough poses in there, got that in place, is now I can just focus on one part of the arm at a time. So instead of taking the whole wing into account, I can just, for example, focus on the upper arm here. I know what the upper arm should do. As the wing comes down, for example, from here to here, as that upper arm right there comes down, it needs to arc forward. So if I look at the elbow from the side here, it needs to go forward and then keep going forward there. So I'm just watching the elbow forward. Now, the slower it's flying, the more that elbow is going to go forward. So if it's really flying slow, it's going to go out there. If it's going faster, we're not going to go as far. But I want to make sure that that elbow moves forward right there. As it comes down here, as it's coming down. The spacing right between these two poses should be very tight. Whereas when it's coming up, it should be a little faster like it is here. So that's good. Okay. So we've got that working there. Goes forward, forward. Let's make sure that matches. And what's not matching here? Okay, good. So from there, still looking at that upper arm, it starts to come back. And here I think I'm bending it a little too far back. So the elbow is popping back and then straight up. It needs to stay a little bit more forward here. So now, if I'm just watching that elbow, it's working. Ketchup chips. It is a great name. That is an awesome name, man. Now I want ketchup chips. For anyone who hasn't had ketchup chips, it's apparently a thing in many countries, like in Canada. Ketchup chips are very popular. For most people, if you've never grown up with them, it sounds disgusting. They are delicious. I love ketchup chips. Let's see. Quick question. Before I have supper, wing skin animated by hand, deformers, or physics? It really depends on the rig. In this case, it's going to have to be animated by hand because there's no physics or anything like that on this rig. Normally, I would use something like physics, like a cloth sim, just because it's a little easier and it's more fun, I guess. You don't have to animate every little wiggle. Now, with that said, if you are animating something like membranes and stuff, one thing that's nice if you have to animate by key is being able to use things like expressions in Maya to add a little randomness in there. That way you can add some shakes and whatnot to the controls, and you're not having to animate every little thing by hand. Okay. So we've got that in there. Let's look at the elbow now. So the lower arm. So as it's coming down, the thing that I want is to really feel, actually this could go back further here. Right through there. I want that to really feel that contrast between going forward, right through there, and pulling back. Okay. So it comes through, down, back, forward. Okay. Be able to push the arc a little bit more here. Okay. So we've got that. The bend in the elbow is going to be very specific as well. So looking at the reference, the elbow straightens out as it comes down. I'm looking at my bat reference right here because we can really see that. See how that elbow straightens out as it comes down? And then it bends right here. The elbow leads back up and the wrist drops down. Okay. So as I'm going to break this down, I just want to get that feeling in there. So again, it comes up, that's going to bend right there. And I can actually rotate this even more so we really feel that elbow leading up as the lower arm drags down. As it comes up, it's going to be bent. So let's bend this a little bit more here. Bend. Starts to straighten. Straightens. It's not going to straighten all the way. So something like that. So we're starting to get that motion in the elbows in there. It's not going to be perfect, but we're getting there. So I started with just these quick poses, and now I'm starting to break it down. Okay, let's look at the wrists now. Okay, so the wrists. I'm going to start with the lowest poses here. So on the lowest pose here, the big thing is that the fingers are going to be curling inwards. I need to really focus on my silhouette. And this is just something very important when you're animating wings. Watch the silhouette that the wings create. As the wings pull up, you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's this very open silhouette to the wings. We see the bottom of the wings. As the wing comes down, you lose that. You see more of the top of the wing. So if we were to look at the dragon here, as the wings come up here, if I had this way, that's not correct, because we're not seeing the inner part of that wing. I need to turn it like so. So get that nice billowing action right through there. Really open it up here as it's coming through. And then as it's coming back down, we get that flip. Before here, we might actually see this point. So like that. Okay. It's not perfect because we still have to animate the actual fingers. But I'm just trying to get the main motion in here. Now if we actually just play through this, it's going to look horrible. Okay. But we're getting there. Okay. Let's see, how far do I want to push this? Well, we could start breaking this down a little bit more here. Really push that wing motion in place. So the way I'm going to do this is, let me look at the timing that I have in my planning. I think I'm just going to add a few more keys. So we've got 1 to 5, then from 5 to 16. That's a big gap right there without keys. So I might break that down with 2 more breakdowns there. So 9 to 16, that's 11 frames. I'm probably going to put 11 frames. Put one on frame 9. Let's actually do 7 and then where do I want to put it? 12 and 9. So what I'm trying to think here, I'm just doing a little bit of math in my head, is which frames are going to just make a better breakdown so that I can easily add more breakdowns later. And what I'm trying to figure out in my head is which key should I favor? So for example, I could put a breakdown on frame 10 here, so from frame 5 to frame 10, but that's a big gap between frame 5 and 10. And because that's also when the wings are turning around, I'm going to have more detail in there anyway. So I might as well just put that breakdown pretty close. So maybe on frame 9 here. That way I can break that down from 5 to 9. That's 4 frames. I could break that down onto 2s and then on 1s. So let's just do that here. So we'll add a breakdown there. And with this breakdown, so the wings change direction here. Perfect. Okay, the wings are starting to come up. So let's get that pose in place. Wings coming up. And with this, let's basically going to happen, I'm just watching my reference here, is the elbows are going to lead upwards. So maybe let's bring them down just a little bit. So we get a little bit more weight in those arms. If I bring them up, that means they're going to ease a lot more to the top. And the elbows are going to really bend forward here. Okay. So we get this motion. The wrists, if we look at the side here, wings come down, and then they'll flare outwards. Like we were talking about before, we're going to see a lot more of the inner part of that wing. So something like that. Push that elbow back just a little bit there. And aim through. How does that feel? Yeah, not great, but not terrible. At the moment, that's pretty much what we can ask for. Let's actually exaggerate this curl in here. So trying to get that nice feeling of overlap without even the membranes. If I can get the membrane feeling like it overlaps at this point, we're in a good spot. Because then I can just layer on top of that. Okay. We're starting to feel a little bit better there. Let's break this down again one more time. So set a key right here. Now this is going to be the arms reaching up to the top there. So I want that to ease in a little bit more. So we'll bring the arms up a little bit more right there. As the arms hit the peak, there's a little bit of a hold that happens in the wings. So I want to start getting that in there. Okay. Now look at the elbow motion. Okay, yeah, that's definitely feeling weird. See how it goes if we watch the elbow back, up, and then back? This should probably be the furthest back right here. And then they start arcing forward again. Even here should probably be a little further back. So what I'm doing is when I'm setting keys, I'm building in my breakdowns into those arms and those elbows, wings, all of that stuff. And that's a very important step, at least for me, as I'm putting all of this in, is I really want to feel those different parts of the body leading and dragging, even in this movement right here. Okay. Now, as the wings come up here, we can drag this just a little bit more. Kind of like that. So the wings are starting to open up. Now, I think I can move them a little higher right there. That's a little better. Get a little bit more of that flicking motion in the wings. Okay. So, a lot of this comes from looking at reference. as I'm doing this, I know I keep repeating, but I'm not just making this up. You want to look at your reference. Pay attention to what's going on here, to all the different elements and how they react and work with each other. Okay, we've got something like that. Now we're starting to get a little bit more of a flapping motion in the front now. Now we've got those breakdowns in place. Let's break down a little bit more. So right here at the top, let's set a key. I'm trying to get things on 4s at this point. And you'll notice that I haven't even done anything with the body yet. That's okay. This is the layered approach. Now, again, if you're animating something where the dragon has to hit a very specific pose, this workflow can still work. It's a little trickier. In that case, I would try to do more of a pose-to-pose style, which is something I'm probably going to try on the next shot that I do with the dragon. This is just a cycle. So let's come through here. Okay. Upper arm is starting to come down. That's good. I might ease it up just a little bit more, so we just get a little bit of an ease in there. Even coming forward, let's ease that out just a little bit more so we get more of a violent downstroke right there. I really want to feel that weight of the arm through there. Okay, something like that. Okay, and then let's go for the wingtips right here. So the wingtips, as it comes up, this is the peak right here on frame 24. So I just want those wingtips to open up nicely right through there. There's a little bit of a flick right in here I kind of like, but it might be a little too much. There's no problem with going back and forth on this, by the way. Okay. So let's keep breaking this down. Now we have to go downwards. So let's see, we've got 18 frames right here as it's coming down. So from frame 24 to frame 42, 18 frames. If I split this right in half, we're going to end up with 9 and 9, which I don't want. So let's break this down. We'll just keep going 4 frames. So set a key here. And let's push that spacing. So as the arm comes down, I want to still hold a little bit more near the top. Once again, as the arm comes down, it really holds near the top before it swoops down. Okay. So something like that. And the wingtips at this point is going to start slicing through the air. So now we don't want to see the bottom membrane here. We want it to start angling like so. It's trying to slice through the air. Imagine, for anyone who's done this before, you stick your hand out of a car window as you're driving, and you see most kids kind of do this at one point. You're just playing with the air and just doing this, knifing through the air. That's what the dragon's doing here. As it's coming down, it's angling its wing down so that it gets a faster downstroke and catching as much air as it can into the membrane of the wing. So if it's flapping down and its wings are like this is putting on the brakes. This is trying to stop itself. Instead, it's going to be angling more this way. The arm is going to start to straighten a little bit more. And we're going to get a little drag in that wrist there. Okay. Let's go 4 frames back here. So the wing's coming down. This is going to be near the bottom. Okay. Flight physics is very interesting. It's one of those things I really enjoy studying and just kind of analyzing. Because it is just a fascinating thing that these flying creatures, whichever they are, birds, bats, whatever, that they've been able to do. Okay. Goes forward. Okay. I think I might need to push my forward arc, but we'll wait until we can track the arcs for that. Okay, so yeah, watch those elbows. See how the elbows go forward, forward, lock, and then just go straight down? That's a little strange. So as I'm doing this, I'm watching my arcs. Okay. I want the elbow to be pointed up a little bit here. So actually no, other way, down like that. So the upper arm is kind of leading the action, and then we get that flip where the elbow starts to drag up, and we get that. Okay. Now at this point, the wings are going to be really pulled up here. So we get that nice, almost W shape before it kind of flicks downwards here. And probably push that a little bit more here. There's going to be a lot of back and forth here, tweaking things. But we're starting to get those flaps in there. Okay. Let's add a couple more breakdowns. So we've got 28 to 38 to 10 frames. I could do 4 frames there. And then that should be good. I could even do, let's just do one in the middle, I guess. And then if I need to, I can add a couple of other frames right in there. I don't want to get too frame heavy just yet. Okay. So now as the wing comes down, I really want to favor the down pose here. Just so we can get that nice fast motion on the down. Really feel that they're putting power into those wings. Or vice versa, I could hold more at the top. So it holds a little bit, and then we get that little fast right there. Honestly, it's whichever you want. I think I might actually favor the top for the specific reason that that's where you usually get a lot more favoring in the wings. Okay. So like that, and then as it's coming down, let's push those membranes. I can refine it a little later. But now we've got that. Let's see how it feels. Okay, better than it was before, but not great. You can definitely see there's that pause at the top there where the wings are up and then it starts to come down and it's just like, eh. That's just the upper arms kind of getting a little bit of a weird hitch in them. At this point, I could actually start going in the graph editor to refine this. So for example, I think our main axis is going to be the Z axis here. And yeah, we can definitely see as it's coming up there, there's a weird hitch right here. That shouldn't happen. If the arm is coming up, it shouldn't slow down and then speed up. And that's probably a little bit of both of these. So let's start refining our spacing just a little bit for our upper arm. Okay. It goes up. Now here, right there, this is where we're getting that weird slowdown. So let's tweak that. So rotate Y, or X is the forward motion. We want to keep that going forward right there. And then rotate Y is the twist in the arm. So whether the elbow is leading or following. And I think overall it's working pretty well. I'm going to worry about that a little later. Big thing is I've got this really big change in direction here. I might want to double check something there. So let's see how that made any difference. If we still, okay, yeah, so now as it comes down, it's a little smoother. It's a little linear right here as it's coming down. I want that to hold a little bit more. So I'm just going to take this and really exaggerate that hold. Now another thing that's happening here is I'm starting to fall into gimbal lock, which is something that is not great. But unfortunately, without going into a lot more kind of refinement of the controls here, it's going to be hard to avoid. The way you would typically avoid this is if your rig had some sort of gimbal control. Let me just see what happens if I amplify that. No. Okay. How does this feel? Okay, better. I think this could be brought down just a little bit. And we need to favor the bottom just a little bit more as well. So this is where I put a key here, right on frame 5, or sorry, from 28 to 38. I just put one key in the middle, and it's like, okay, great. I don't need any more. I'm finding that I need more because it needs to ease into the bottom here a little bit more than I have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to retime this just a little bit. I'm going to put that back one frame right there, and then put another breakdown in between those two. Right there. And I can do this in the graph editor. I just want that to really ease in here. So we get that fast motion in the middle, and then nice motion. So you can bake, though, to avoid gimbal. That's what an Animator Framestore told me. Yeah, so what you could do is take all of these controls and constrain them and bake out onto different locators and stuff, which could work really, really well. In my case, I might do that as I go forward. We'll see. I'm not too worried about it at the moment. We'll see what happens when I start going to splining and polish stuff, but yeah, it's not a huge kind of issue right now. Okay, so just not looking at the wingtips, just looking at the arms. I think that's working pretty well. Okay, it's not perfect by a long shot. The big thing I'm noticing is the elbow feels kind of like it goes forward, locks. So if I watch the elbow here, it goes back, then forward, and then just goes straight down here. So that's going to be the rotate X. Let's see. I have bought a rig, the Jamin Dragon, in order to animate it, but I would like to change the model a bit. How can I get body geometry so that I can select the faces and vertices? Basically what you need to do is go into the outliner, find the piece of geometry that you want to be able to select. So for example, let's say I want to select the dragon skin right here, which should be, let's say under here. I'm just gonna, there we go. So that's the body geometry. You just go into the attribute editor and under object display drawing overrides, turn off enable override right there. And then that should be, you should be able to select it. If it's not there, it might be in the group above it or being controlled by something else. So if it's being controlled by something else, the easiest way to find out is right click on enable override, and there should be a button here that says, what is it? Go to, what's it called again? Why can't I think of what they name it? Right here. It's the same thing here. If you select connection, that's it. That should bring you to whatever is controlling it. And then you can just turn off the override and you can select the geometry and do whatever you want, which is really nice. So let's take a look at that rotate X. So right now, the big thing that I want is from the up pose of that arm, which, looking at my planning, is always nice to have your planning. That's going to be from frame 16 to frame 42. So 16 to 42, that arm needs to go forward. And right now it is doing that. So 16 to 42 is going forward, but it goes most of the way forward right there, and then it just slowly eases in, which just kind of feels weird. Feels like it needs to be pulled back just a little bit here. We get less of an ease at the end there. Maybe ease out just a little bit more. So something a little bit more like so. This is where learning to really read your graph editor can be very helpful. So now it comes down from 16. That. And we get that constant forward motion in the elbow. Right through there. Before it changes direction. Now when it changes direction, it's definitely changing in a weird way. It just kind of pulls holes and just snaps. So I think what I need to do is start changing direction just a little sooner. More like that. So I use the graph editor a lot of times to, I'm not polishing, I don't consider this polish, but to refine my motions and make them more organic. It comes forward, and I think I could even have it start changing direction even sooner than that. I really want that breakup of action where as the arm comes down, we feel that bend going through the arm just a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more like so. We'll see how that feels. And this is one of the things I like about using the layered method, is I can feel all of this out without having to worry about everything else. I'm just trying to get this wing to feel good, and then I can add the rest in later. Yeah, that feels better already. I feel like that elbow is swinging down, and then it's starting to pull back around instead of just hitting down, then moving back, then up, then down. I'm trying to get this like nice organic rotation going through the whole thing. Okay. Not perfect by any means, but it's getting there. Let's look at our rotate Y. The rotate Y is definitely going to be the weird one in this. And mostly because of the gimbal that we're going to be fighting just a little bit. Honestly, if this is the only gimbal we're fighting is right here, not a big deal. I really want the elbow to lead there. And then I could even push it a little bit more here, I think. Now, I'm making a big change here. A good thing to do before you make any big change, take your entire curve, save the buffer. So right here, I click this button, it's going to save a buffer of the curve. Basically a previous version. What this allows me to do is, if I want to try something, I can just really exaggerate it here and then quickly go, do I like that or that? That or that? I can compare both, which is really nice. So I'm just getting that in there. See how that feels? Now here, let's think of how that elbow is going to move. That elbow comes down. The elbow should be leading right here. So I really want that elbow to lead down. As it comes down here, it's still going to lead, but it's going to favor the elbow leading, and then as the wing comes down, you're going to get this quick flip right there of the actual elbow suddenly flipping over right there. So that's what I'm going to try to get here. I think I can maybe push this a little bit more there. We start to get that rotation through there. Just a little bit more. Okay. We'll go with that for now. Maybe bring that down just a little bit there. Okay. Let's see what we've got. So one thing I'm doing is I'm just watching the arms here. I'm not watching the rest of the wing, just the upper arm right there. How does that feel? Let's actually make sure I cycle this properly. So if it's a 42 frame cycle, I could actually just, let's focus on the 42 frames here. Or actually let's do 42, 84. Make sure my first and last pose match up. That'll be very important. I don't want things to get really weird. Okay. How's this feeling? Speed-wise, not bad. I kind of feel like the upwards motion is a little fast. So, that change in direction right here. This is going to be the rotate Z. Yeah, right there. Needs to ease out just a little bit more. And then go faster in the middle. Yeah, something like that. Let's kind of take a look at it from the side. Okay, not bad. Definitely getting some pops and wiggles in the membrane area, but if I'm just looking at the arm, feeling pretty good. Okay, let's do the elbow now. Because we've definitely got a little bit of weirdness right here. You can see it right there. So, I'm just thinking this through. How is the wing going to move through here? So let's start with the downwards motion. As the wing comes through here, it's going to want to straighten out. So it comes down. As it's going down, it straightens out that elbow. Well, what's happening here? Why is this not straighter here? Let's just ease it. Nice and simply. I'm going to use the Animbot tool here just to create that nice ease. Honestly, you could do this just with just moving your keys. This is just going to be a little faster. Okay. So we get that nice straight. As it gets down to the bottom here, it's going to start to bend. And I feel like we could start to bend it just a little sooner. Just a little bit here. Something like that. So we can just feel that little bit of a hint of the elbow dragging right here. Actually, maybe even more than that. Okay. Yeah, that feels. Okay, yeah, that's feeling better. So I want that connection between the upper arm and the lower arm. Okay, now it goes up. I really want to drag this here. So this is coming up. Let's favor that a little bit more. And when's going to be the biggest bend? Probably keep it bent a little bit longer here. At the top. Just a little bit. So something like that. Let's see how that feels. So now I'm just watching the wrist motion. Not the actual membranes, just the wrist. And it's feeling okay, but I'm kind of feeling like there's a little hitch in there. Right in here. And I think that's going to be my rotate Y of the upper arm. Right here. Gonna push that a little bit more. Okay. Now I'm starting to get into a little bit more refining polish stuff, but I really just want to get a good feel for this. Okay. Getting there. At this point, let's just quickly do a pass on the wrists here. And then we're going to start layering into the rest of the body. It might seem like we're taking a long time on this, but I would rather get the wings working pretty good right now. And then really focus on getting the rest in place after. If I can get the wings feeling good, everything else will fall into place. Okay. So I think I can add a little bit more drag inwards here. Definitely feeling some weirdness in the curves right there. So let's get that in place. Down. Push that in a little bit more. And then let's clean up our curves right here. I'm definitely getting some gimbal lock at this point. Feels not a big deal, but again, if you're starting to get gimbal lock, the ideal is to separate out your controls. Okay. Starts to come down here. This is the peak right there. And let's keep dragging that a little bit more. That's better. A nice drag in there. Okay. And just clean up my curves because this is a mess. Add a little bit more there. And then just clean up my arc there. Okay. I can work on the actual shaping of the wings in just a little bit. But as long as I get the main motion in there, that's going to be the important thing for me. Okay. See how that feels. Okay. Not bad. There's a little too much flick right there at the end. See how the wings kind of just hold down, hold, and then flick right there. It should start rotating in a little faster right there. I think that's my rotate Z. Yeah. Okay, and then a little bit of rotate Y, I think. So let's see how that feels. Okay. Yeah, that's better already. So instead of waiting, and then flicking, it's starting to rotate in a little sooner. Okay. Now it's not perfect, but I've got my timing and my main motion in there. That's the important bit. I think if anything, I might just exaggerate the range of motion. I think I could probably go a little lower with the arms. And maybe push the spacing a little bit more. Definitely gonna have to watch my arc on the front there, especially on the tip of the membrane. The fingertip. Right here. got a little bit of a wiggle. Wonder if I can spot the wiggle right here. Maybe around there, and then yeah, we'll call it for now. So, got the wings in place. Are they perfect? Not at all. They definitely need a lot more work. We need to do a whole pass on the membranes to really get in there. Now, we could do that now if we wanted to. At this point, we can finish off the wings, get them a little closer. So I would use my bat reference for this. Really look at that reference in here. See how those membranes curl in, straighten out. See how it's not just straight, it's trying to catch the wind right in there. So I could easily do that. So let's actually just add a quick pass on that here. So find my key poses. So let's start with this. This is the lowest down of the membrane. Now, do you have any suggestions for free ArcTool? The My Motion tracker is kind of bad. We need something like Animbot, but free version. There used to be a free version or a free Arc Tracker. I think it was just called Arc Tracker. I really don't know of any free ones. The only one that I know of is Animbot. If you go to, I don't even remember the site. It got renamed. Creative Labs, I think it was called, something like that. It's a repository of Maya plugins and things. You could maybe find something on there. But yeah, it's if you're looking for an arc tracker, what I usually recommend is the grease pencil tool. As much as it's like not an arc tracker like what you're probably looking for, it is really good. Okay. So on this frame, this is going to be the lowest point of the wings. This is when the fingers are starting to curl in. And I'm just going to add a little curl right in there. I'm not going to worry about too much exaggerated posing there. The pinky is going to be curled out a little bit more. I should make sure I get right to that first joint. So the wings are trying to catch as much air as possible here. So I'm just going to grab these. Add nice rotation in there. So something like that. At this point, it's a lot of just, I guess you could say tedium. Selecting one joint at a time and posing them out. So I'm probably not going to be doing too much of this because I do want to get to the cooler stuff for everyone here. But this is just part of that process. Going through, posing out, bone after bone. Now, if you have Animbot, one thing that's really nice is there is a mirror function. So you would only have to animate the one if you're doing a cycle like this. And then you can just copy it onto the other wing. So it saves a lot of time. I don't want to use that right now because I know most people don't have it. So I'm going to be doing it the old-fashioned way. And what I'm doing here, just to explain the process, is I'm just trying to get the feeling that the wingtips are catching the air, but also looking at it from different angles to make sure that I'm getting this arc in the tips of the wings. So you can get a nice feeling of the wings trying to catch the air here. And I think I rotated these a little too much because we should be seeing the inside of the wing. So this is also where you want to watch your silhouette value of the wings. So for example, let's pull up here. The wings coming up. I could really exaggerate that elbow leading there. So I could feel like I could take this and just do that. Yeah, that feels better. It's gonna throw off all my arcs, but yeah, that feels much better. So don't be afraid of reposing some stuff. I noticed that the wings were a little off, so I tweaked them. Now I just need to repose this so that the wing keeps going forward, like so. We've got a little bit of a wiggle in the arc. I can refine that later. Okay. Wings coming up. And at this point, let's actually come up here. Okay. And at this point, what I'm trying to find is some key poses where I know what the membrane is going to do exactly. So let's actually go in here. These are going to be nice and straight right there, probably a little bit further back as it's coming down. Open up just a little bit. Yeah. Curl this in just a little bit more here. Take those membranes. And I'm just gonna globally curl them in. Really get the nice contrast right in there. So as they're coming down, they're gonna be straight. I could even curl it back just a little bit. Then curl in, and then start to straighten out here. So something like that. Okay. Not perfect. We've got just a little bit of membrane motion in there. I could refine it later just to get the nice motion, but for now, let's actually just fix that wobble right in there. So I believe it's just the elbows here. Yeah, there's something going on there. Right here. Push that back just a little bit. ease that down. They're just refining my arcs. Okay. Let's see how that feels. Better. The wobble is gone, it feels like, for the most part. Okay. Yep, there we go. Now we've got that nice exaggerated elbow raise. Nice. Still some stuff I'd refine in here, personally. There's kind of a weird offset in the elbow and the wrists there. But I can refine that on my own time. Let's say we've got the wings pretty much where we want them for now. Again, look at your reference. This is going to be the biggest thing that's going to help get the wings in place. Look at what shapes they're creating, what silhouettes, values you've got on the wings. There's a little wiggle in the wrist there. Right up there. I'd have to tweak that. See, this is what happens. I get caught up on the little details. But anyway, you just want to refine your stuff and get it decent. Not perfect, decent. Now, what we can do is layer things in. Because at this point, we've just got wings, which, honestly, doesn't give much of a flight, does it? It's just flapping, but nothing else is happening. We want the whole dragon to be flying. So, this is where the power of layered animation comes in. The rest of this is actually not going to be too hard to put in. We've taken a lot of time trying to get these wings in place, and I would use a little bit more time to really refine stuff. But now, it's just a matter of connecting things. So, for example, let's get the shoulders in place. The shoulders just follow what the upper arms are doing. So, that's mostly going to be, and actually I just noticed, curse me in my nitpicking. There's a little wiggle right in there. Okay. One day I'm going to move off of these wings. Okay. So it's mostly that rotate Z in my case. That's the up and down of the arms right there. So what I can do is I can just take that curve. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it, in this case, on the rotate X of the shoulder. So let's take that, edit, paste. Now it's probably going to be a little too big or in the wrong spot, but look at that. Just by doing that, I now have that shoulder motion in there. And suddenly you compare both wings, even though this is horribly out of place here. Let's actually get that scaled down. So I want the lowest point to probably be around there. Let's look for the highest point. Actually, the highest point's not bad. Maybe around there. Okay. With that, see how that shoulder suddenly feels like it's attached to the flying motion? I can keep going with that. So the shoulder should also be rotating forward. So that's going to be the rotate Z in this case, I believe. So let's go here. Yeah, rotate Z, which if we look at the arm, that should be our, let's see, rotate which one am I looking for? Rotate X should do. Yeah. So our rotate X should be able to go onto the rotate Z of the shoulder. So I'm going to copy that, rotate Z, and it's not going to be perfect, but it gets me started. So let's paste that in and see what we've got. Okay. Kind of doing it, but it's going backwards. I'm just going to scale my curve. I'm going to go to Edit, Scale, set that to -1, so it flips the curve. And we've got that. This nice rotation in the shoulder. This is why I spent so much time on just getting the wing right. Because now I have less work to do on these following curves. So let's get this in place. I want to figure out the range of motion. So maybe back around there. I want to exaggerate it. And then as it comes forward, let's keep that going right around there. That should be good. Okay, we've got our range of motion there. Perfect. Yay. Well, what else can we do? Because we're working in a layered way and we're using our infinity cycles, we're working on a cycle. The shoulder should lead the arm. So I'll just take these curves, boop, boop, maybe 2 frames. There we go. The shoulder is now moving ahead of the arm, and we get that rolling motion that's leading that whole flight path right in there. It can use some refinement, but it's in there. Done. Let's actually maybe tone that down just a little bit. Feels like it's going just a little too high up there. Okay. Let's get it on the other arm. Well, that's going to be easy. I just need to copy one to the other. Copy. Let's do our rotate X. Paste. Right in there. And let's make sure in my paste options, I want to replace. Okay, good. That way I don't have any extra keys in there. Same thing here. Let's copy the rotate Z, paste it on the rotate Z. Edit, paste. There we go. That looks like something's a little off, potentially. We'll double check that. No, it's good. So, we've got that. Yay. What else do we do now? Well, we need to get that chest attached into there at this point. Now, I could copy curves. I could just take the up and down of the wings and paste that onto the chest. Or if I wanted to, I could just animate the chest myself. And let's just do it that way, very quickly. In this case, it's just going to be a little up and down, a little bit forward motion. So the body here, the chest, its up pose is going to be on frame 7. So that's going to be the translate Y. Frame 7 is going to be the up. I'm just going to retime some stuff here. Start getting my graph editor in place. The down pose is going to be frame 27. Down. And then from there, the next key is 48. So that's going to be the up pose again. And I can just delete the rest. Right like that. So, with this, let's make sure our first and last poses match. I can just go through and figure out my range of motion. So I want the chest. Let's actually get rid of the other keys as well. just so I don't need to deal with this. Again, this is layered animation. I don't need to keep everything in line right now. So, how high do I want that chest to go? Let's just bring it up, see how far we can go. We'll try to exaggerate here. Up there and then down there. So we get this. And already, just adding that, we're starting to feel a little bit more life in there compared to what we had before. Maybe tone it down a little bit. Okay. Nice. So at this point, I just need to break it down some more. So let's just add a key right here. Actually, let's add 2 keys. There and there. And I'm just going to ease that in and out. So as the chest comes down, the wings come up. I have to think of the physics here. As the wings come down, it is starting to catch the air again, which means that the body is going to start to slow down here. And then as it's coming down here, the wind pressure is going to pop that body up again. It's going to go up. There's going to be this bouncing ball hang time as it comes up here. Here it'll hang. And then I might actually not ease that in quite so much at the bottom. Almost let it hit at the bottom here. So let's add one more key right there. We get something a little bit more like this. So you can see how it comes down and there's almost this bouncing ball hit right in there before it slows down. It really hangs down in that low before coming back up. Let's see how that feels. Okay, not bad, but it kind of sticks a little too down there. So let's ease just a little bit more right there. Just a little. That's a little better. Then I think I can bring this up just a little sooner here. Something like that. Trying to make it feel like that chest and the wings are tied together. So as the wings beat down, we get that motion up in the chest. At any point, if I feel, it's not enough, I can just take my whole curve, just scale it up. Something like that. Okay. This is the nice thing with layered animation. I can change this easily, and I'm just focusing on little bits instead of focusing on everything pose to pose. How are the hips working? How are the chest, the tail, all of it all at the same time? I'm focusing on one section at a time, making sure it feels good. Okay. I think the upwards motion is feeling pretty good. I could probably exaggerate a little bit more, but for now that's fine. Let's add a little bit of forward momentum in there. So this is going to be the translate Z. Now for the forward momentum, how do I want to do this? There's not going to be a huge amount, honestly. It's just going to be enough to get things to feel connected. So I think I'm just going to take that kind of forward motion of the arms and use that as kind of an overlapping motion there. Let's actually just take what we have in the shoulders. So this is going to be our rotate X, I believe it was. No, rotate Z. So we'll copy that. Go to our chest control. And we'll take our translate Z here. Edit, paste. Just like that. And let's see what we've got. Okay, this is backwards. So as those wings go back, I want the body to go back as well. So edit, scale, -1, and make sure I have the whole curve selected when I do that. Edit, scale. There we go. So now as the wings come back, the body has that little bit of motion in there. Now it's a little too much and it's too offset. I want it to feel a little bit tied in with the shoulders, just a little bit. And then let's just scale this way down. I want to feel it more than I see it. Okay. Even that's a little too much. Something like that. A little off. Something not quite working in there. I think I just need to round out my curve a little bit more. So right here, it's a little too linear. Let's try easing that a little bit more. So I used it to get my start, and now I can refine it just a little bit more. Okay. How does this feel? Okay, better. I think I can delay it a little bit. Let the wings lead the chest. Okay. I think we're getting there. Doesn't have to be much, but it just wanted a little something. Okay. I'm going to scale it down just a little bit more. Really just want to feel it more than I see it. Okay. Yeah. So very subtle in there. What else do we need? Well, for the chest, we don't really need a lot of rotate Y, a lot of kind of side to side this way, because it's just a straight cycle. If we were actually animating a character or the dragon flying through the air and swinging through, we definitely want to add some of that stuff in there. Some twist like this. In this case, because it's a straight cycle, we really just need some rotate X. So let's do that. So rotate X is going to tie a lot into the hip motion. So actually, before we do the rotate X on the body, let's actually get the hips in place. Because the hips are going to be a big thing here. And the big thing with the hips is that they are counter to what the wings are doing. So a lot of people, when they're animating dragons or birds or something like that, they would offset the hips from the chest. So let me actually copy this curve here. I'll apply it to the hips. Like that. So now the hips and chest are going to move together up and down. And then what they would do is just offset that. So you get something like this. Let's do one more frame. Just like that. Got something stuck in my throat all of a sudden. Ah, that's better. So, you've got that. Very slight offset motion there, which is not bad. Doesn't feel terrible. The problem is that that's not really how flight mechanics work on most birds and flying creatures. What happens instead is that the hips counter what the wings are doing. So what that means is as the wings come down at their lowest point, the hips are going to be up at their highest point. So in this case, it's actually going to be about there. As the wings reach their highest point, right around here, the hips are going to be at their lowest point. They're countering each other. So I want to build that in right here, like that. So as the wings come down, let's actually make this bigger so we can see that a little bit more easily. Whoop. Maybe not that high. Okay. So we get that. See how it's not offset from the body, but offset from the wings. And this creates the feeling that the creature is using its core muscles, its abs, its legs even, to help propel itself forward. If it's just overlapping the body, all you've got is the wings flapping and the rest of the body just lazily flapping in the wind. The whole body is working to create this flight in the animal, in the creature. So I really want to get that in there. So something like that works pretty well. Let's see. I think here. Definitely add the rotations in there. So the rotation of the hips is going to match the up and down in this case. So I'm going to use this curve to give me a start. So let's paste that on the rotate X. Paste. And let's see what we get. So as we see here, as the hips are coming down right now, as the hips are coming down, they're rotating out. Then as they come up, they rotate in. Well, let's actually just look at our reference. Let's look at the bat here, for example. As those hips rotate up, they're rotating inwards, or translate up. You get this nice big round shape right there. As the wings are up, the body is arced the other way. So let's make sure we have that. Wings up. Hey, right way. Wings down, curled in. Nice. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that the hips are just a little too high here. I'm just going to drag the whole thing down right around there. We get a little bit more weight down below, something like that. Let's take our rotation and offset it. So this is where, again, you could take a look at your reference. What's leading? Is it the translation of the hips or the rotation of the hips? And in this case, I almost think it's the rotation that's leading the motion. So I'm going to take my rotation there and let it lead to the translation of the hips a couple of frames. So we get that. Something like that. Okay, great. So, is it perfect? No, we can come in here and adjust any of these things as we go. But now we need that rotation of the chest. Well, the rotation of the chest, just like on a human, counters the rotation of the hips. Basically what that means is that if I rotate my chest back this way, my hips go the other way. If I rotate in, my hips go the other way. So if I just take this curve here of the hips, copy it onto the chest, so rotate X, edit, paste. Let's see what happens. We get that countering motion in there. Aha. Now, this dragon is definitely flapping his heart out at this point. The chest doesn't need to rotate that much. So let's take this whole thing, tone it way down. Yes, he's very hard working, this poor dragon. Let's tone it way, way, way down. I just want to feel that more than anything. Even the hips, they're too much at this point. So we've got that. I could even offset it one frame if I wanted to from the hips, just so we can get a little overlap between the body and the hips. Let's tweak that rotation here just a little bit. A little lower, lower, lower. Maybe something like that. Okay. There we go. But you can see how it's starting to feel connected. Everything's kind of working together. And we're just taking these elements and kind of building them in to each other. Okay. What else can we use? Well, we have to do the head, definitely. The hips are dropping a little fast right there for my liking. I'll have to double check my translate Y. Right there. Just a little bit more hang time. I'm just trying to get the hips to feel a little bit more weighty. That's a little better. Okay. So we've got the hips in place, the chest in place. At this point, all of this is just refining. There's no more like, okay, I've got to block all of this in. I have to get all of this just right. It's pretty much there. It just needs to be tweaked. Get a little bit more weight, adjust our curves just a little bit, refine our spacing, just maybe tweak that a little bit there. Things like that. Tracking our arcs. But we're getting there. Now let's actually do the head, because the head is going to be very important. And the head is what's really going to help sell whether this is a predatory animal or just like a lazy, it's not really paying too much attention. Now, the main issue here is that the head is being very much controlled by the body, which I do not like. The big reason, it really shouldn't be controlled by the body. The head should kind of do its own thing. And I don't want to have to counter animate the head for every little movement that I make. So, to solve this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a locator. And I'm going to use this as a new head control. So let's call this head locator. And I'm going to first constrain it to the head. That way it snaps into place. So I'm going to select the head, then the locator. Constrain parent, maintain offset turned off. So it snaps into place. Let's delete the constraint and then reverse it. And actually, I'm going to zero out my rotate X. Do I need to? No, let's keep it the way it is. That way it matches the head rotation exactly. And we're just going to reverse that that constraint. So now we take the locator, then the head, and I'm going to constrain the head to the locator. What this means is that the head stays perfectly in place. Aha! With this, I can just animate my locator moving up and down in whatever I want. You get the exact arc I want for the head just with this. So, for example, let's take our translate Y. I can use the translate Y of the chest as a starting point. Let's copy that and set a key on our locator and translate Y. Let's paste that in. Ooh, a little too far. Poor dragon. So let's get that head back into place here. So right around there. Pretty good. And now the head is moving right in line with the body. At this point, we just have to choose, do we want the head to lead the action or drag behind? If it's a predatory animal, it's most likely going to lead the action. So I'm going to have the head try to lead everything, even the hips. So something like that. Let's maybe make that head motion just a little bit bigger. So just, I'm making it bigger so we can see. It's actually going to be the least rotate or translation because the head is stabilized. But you can see here how suddenly we get that head kind of leading the action down, and then the rest goes through. It's very slight, but it's in there. But let's make it a little bit more natural. So it's going to be stabilized right there. See how that suddenly makes it feel more predatory? So let's bring it down. Okay. I can use this curve here. So let's copy that. Let's put it on our rotate X. Maybe make this bring it down so its head's in the right direction again. Oop. Let's make it bigger just so we can see what's happening. And what I want here is to add a little overlap to the head. Now, as it moves up and down, we just get a little bit of overlap as it goes through. Something like that, potentially. Once again, very small. We don't want this head to be bobbing up and down. And I think I need to go the other way. Yeah, like that. Now we've got that head kind of leading the action. So it tilts down and then the head goes down and we get that. Very slight, but it's in there. The head is a little flat at the top there. What I mean by flat at the top is as the head's coming up, I almost feel like it's plateauing right here. I'm just gonna bring that down a little bit, avoid the plateau. Same thing with the rotation. So we get something a little bit more like that. Then we can add some forward back in there. So if I wanted to, let's just see how far I can use this one curve. Let's copy that. Let's put that into our translate Z. The poor thing. Let's get that back into place. And yeah, I want the head to tilt first, then go forward, then go down. Yeah. So let's do that. Now I think this might be going in the opposite direction. I just need to scale it up to see. So as it goes down, yeah, it should be going the other way. So let's take our curve, scale into the negative, which is going to break our poor thing. Move the head back into place. Now we get this motion. So like that. So we just get a little bit of that forward motion in there. Now again, keep in mind, I'm not really polishing this up right now. I'm just throwing these in. I'd need to really go in here and refine the arcs. Like the head arc right now, it's kind of going diagonally like this. I'd want to push a little bit more of that motion so it kind of jumps out a little faster. So for example, as it goes out here, maybe make that a little bit more aggressive. Right in there. And then a little less aggressive coming back. So every curve is going to be ever so slightly different. Right now I'm just kind of copying and pasting globally just to show what we can get very quickly. So something like that. Now we get just a little bit more of a push forward there. Still a little too diagonal, but that would be my rotate or my translate Y. We just need to be pushed a little bit more. So I can just keep going with that. Okay. See, how does it look like from a distance? Actually look at it without all the controls. Well, we're getting there. At this point, it's really just the legs and the tail. And it's the same thing. Copy and paste. So honestly, this is the big thing. Once you can get the main motion in place, the wings in this case, everything else falls into place. Now, what happens if we need the body to hit certain poses first? You just get the body working first, and then you can get the wings on after. As long as you have something to work off of, you can build the rest into it. And again, is it perfect? No, not at all. It needs a lot of refining here. But whereas it took us, what was it, nearly an hour and a half just to get the wings right, of course, keeping in mind that we're talking about the whole process, in about less than an hour, we've gotten most of the rest of it in place. Not perfect, but in place. So even if you're working on a much longer shot, not just one little cycle, you can get a whole chunk of your animation really solid very quickly. Let's actually add a little bit to the feet here. So I'm going to take my translate Y of the hips, and I'm actually going to take, how do I want to do the feet? Okay, good. Yeah, this should work. I'm going to take the translate Y of the feet, or sorry, of the hips, copy that, and let's paste it onto the feet. Edit, paste, and we get that. Okay, what's just linked in right there. Let's do the same thing with that foot. Edit, paste, take both of these feet and just move them back up into place right there. So we get this now, where the hips and the feet are nice and connected. I can just offset them. There we go. Done. You get the nice overlap in the feet compared to the hips. Now, if I wanted to, I could, again, do the same thing, just copy curves. Or I could even just animate this myself. So as the hips come up here, maybe I want the hip or the feet to move forward ever so slightly. So as it comes up, we almost feel that little like pull forward of the legs. Make sure I delete the keys on both of these. At the stretch down here, let's make sure this is the longest. And then we'll just kind of clean up our curves. Make sure these are actually on the same level there too. So we get something like that. We don't have to copy curves. I'm copying the curves a lot, just kind of for the sake of demonstration. But at any point, I can just shape the curves however I want and get something more interesting and dynamic. So let's just tweak that a little bit here. Maybe hold this a little bit more. Let's see how that feels. Okay. Not great, but maybe if I just offset it a little bit. So we can just do something like that. Honestly, the feet for the dragon, we can do whatever we want. Some you can move a lot more, others a lot less. I can even create a little offset between the feet. So let's take our translate Y of 1 foot, have it offset a couple of frames. Like so. I could even bring 1 foot down a little bit and just slightly more forward. So let's do something like that. So now we get just a slight offset in the feet. Just like that. Done. Now again, I know I keep repeating this, but it's important to keep in mind. This is, I would consider blocking. Even though I'm in the graph editor, I'm doing all of this stuff, this is still blocking in the cycle. I'm trying to get the base motions in there. Once I have all of these in there, I would go through and really refine them. This is how they block in VFX. There is one way that they block in VFX. There is no like absolute way that you must block in animation. This is just one way that you can use to reuse a lot of aspects. And sometimes I will mix this with pose to pose. So for example, if I'm animating a shot that has to hit these very specific moments, I'm going to use pose to pose, get all of that blocked in for the whole character, and then use layered animation to maybe just add something more to the head or get extra little hit in the hips. But for something like this, I can very easily just use it for the whole shot. The main thing, though, is it all came from the wings. Now, the wings aren't perfect. I would need to really refine these a lot more, especially the membrane, like right here. This is not a correct pose. There's too much of a bend right there. But once you get that in there, at least for a flight cycle, a lot of the rest can come into play very quickly. And a lot faster than trying to get all of these subtle motions, just like rotating the chest and hoping you're going in the right direction. I feel like I need more neck motion. Like we were seeing with the goose, the neck was the thing that was really kind of adjusting the body, or kind of countering the body versus the head. I'm going to just try copying my translation from the body here onto the neck. We'll see what we get. Yeah, already that feels better. Now you really feel that neck doing the work versus the head just kind of hanging there. It feels a little odd because you have that break there because we're in proxy mode. But let's actually take that and offset it a couple frames. Okay. So we've got something like that. And as you can see, it doesn't take too long once you have the base. And we could just keep going and going and going. I could even start to add some variations where you'll notice that the dragon is kind of perfectly straight right here, which is okay, but it's not that visually interesting. What if I wanted the dragon to almost like snake through the air? Kind of like it's a snake or a lizard. Well, I could do this in a lot of different ways, but it would just be layering in some more animation. So for example, let's kind of figure out when the body is going to twist. The body is going to be probably the least amount. The hips are going to twist the most, and then it would be into the tail and the legs. But because I'm working in a layered manner, it's not very hard to just go in here, and I could either have the twisting happen on every beat. So at every time the wing goes up, for example, so let's go here. As the wing goes up, the body is going to twist one way. As the wings go down, they twist another way. So we get that motion. Then back and forth, back and forth. Or I could make it so that as the wings come up, we cycle it back up here, and that's when it goes the other way. So it's every 2 beats is when it's kind of swimming through the air. So let's do that here. So on frame 1, it's going to be down there. That means the first cycle would be on frame 41. But let's go all the way to 82. Instead. 82 or 81? No, it should be 82. Okay. So from there, this one's going to be on frame 41. Like that. Now we get this. Very rough. But you can see how every other wing stroke, it repeats the cycle. So instead of having it just kind of everything always happening on that one beat, it's very easy to just offset that. Now, let's actually make this a little bit more visually interesting in terms of a curve. Just going to add some keys. And then favor the poses. Just a little bit. Just to make it a little bit more dynamic. Okay. So let's say something like that. I'm going to keep it exaggerated for now. Let's copy that. Paste it on the hips. Rotate Y. Edit. Paste. What do we get? We get this. The hips and chest are doing just the same motion together. That's not that interesting. Let's flip the curve. Now we get contrapposto. Like that. Which is okay. But the hips should probably drag after the chest. So let's offset that a little bit. We get a little bit more like this. Now this is a lot. But if we kind of look at it from a distance here, we'll kind of use it right here. We start getting that snaking motion through there. I could even add it a little bit to the head. Add some side to side to the head. The head's going to be looking forward, but we can add that translate X to the head. Now it's going to break that head motion. Let's actually, maybe not too bad. So right now it's moving with the chest, which is actually not bad. I might just delay it a little bit. So we start getting a little bit more like that. And I can just play around with the offsets very quickly to exaggerate that motion. So we get something like that. Again, is this perfect? No. But we very quickly blocked it out. Now we just need a little more rotation on the head now. Because if it's going side to side, it's definitely going to need to rotate. And probably, let's see, rotate and translate. So, and then just make sure that it keeps looking forward. So something like that. There we go. I could even add that to the legs. So right now the legs are kind of just straight below. Let's just do the one leg here. Translate X, I believe it should be. Yep. Paste that in there. Now, you get that. A little bit of sideways motion in there. Let's actually copy it from the hips so we can connect it a little bit more closely. So translate X. Or sorry, I had rotate Y. Copy that onto the foot. And then we just need to offset. Just a little bit. There we go. So you can see how suddenly that motion is much more complex feeling than what we had before. Is it done? No. We need to add toes, we need to add the tail, we need to refine everything, get a little bit more weight. So for example, the head is feeling very soft. That's just because the spacing needs to have a little bit more of a sharp motion to it. It's too slow. And this is going to be the big thing that's going to add weight, is it's not slowing things down. It's just letting them ease in and out more. So for example, let's take the head. It's side to side. It can still move quickly, but I just want to ease it more right in there. So now it takes more time to swing from one side to the other, but the transition is still fast. That's what's going to get you the weight. The timing and the spacing. Slow timing, but the spacing is not even. So yeah. At this point, it's just more of the same, honestly. I could keep going and going and going with this, but hopefully at this point it makes sense. Like I said, it's really studying your reference, watching your key poses, really understanding how the mechanics work, and then just breaking it down. Now, looking at the wings here, the big thing, if I was to critique myself, the arms are still not working correctly. What I need to do is go back, find my key poses in my animation, just exaggerate those a little bit more. What I'm missing right now is the contrast right here. It feels like the elbows need to be further bent here. I'm missing that kind of that pull and then release. If I was to try and exaggerate this some more, really exaggerate that in here. Now that's going to throw off all my animation, but now you push that a little bit more. That way we get that feeling right there, that uncurling. Once I do that, I need to refine my membranes in there, the fingers, because the fingers really need to have that nice overlap and kind of drag through. See how much I've wrecked the wings just by doing that. Okay, so that's not too bad. I need to add the membranes in there, the fingers. Really curl those in, get those shapes in there. As I'm doing that, I would do that with the skin on though. I wouldn't do it in proxy mode like I've been doing here. I would put it into the actual skin version so I can see the shape of the wings. Let's delete that. Okay. So really watching those shapes of the wings, and you'll notice that suddenly it doesn't look as good, doesn't it? That's because you can really notice here how those wings are just flat right there. And then here, look at all that. This is all that weirdness. This is where we need to come in and start tweaking our membrane controls here, which we haven't touched yet. So I need to do a whole pass on that. But in this case, really bringing these in here, getting that round shape in there. Just look at your reference. Really pay attention to the shape that the wings are creating. So something more like that. In this case, that's just going to take a long time. Usually I try to do this once I get the main motion of the wing in place, because otherwise you're just fighting this all the time, which is a pain. Easier just to focus on the main motion here, get the timing and the spacing working the way you want. That head is moving way too much there. Getting picky. So let's take our translate X and our rotate Y. Just scale both of those down. That's better. That head should feel stable. It'll make it feel much more